Hi, so we have Jessica with us today, and I'm super, super excited to hear your story and talk to you. So I would love if you could just start out by telling me how you got diagnosed with your allergens and what it's like to live with them today.
Sure. So my name is Jessica. I run the blog Tasty Meditation, Tales from a Gluten-Free Kitchen. I'm actually coming up on my 10-year anniversary of my celiac disease diagnosis.
Wow, that's
What is time anymore, right? So when I first started developing symptoms, it was actually about 6 years prior to my diagnosis.
okay.
I was in college at the time, and I started getting some very classic GI symptoms of celiac. I just had these big bouts of stomach aches that were really intense. I wound up in the emergency room twice, I think. But of course, it was explained away as, food poisoning, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I had a lot of stomach aches on and off, and I reasoned and people thought that I just had a sensitive stomach. And people told me to do food diaries to try to figure out what was going on, but I didn't have stomach aches like every moment of the day or like 5 minutes after I ate wheat. I had them periodically at random times. So I would look at this food diary and say, I just ate an apple. Why do I have a stomach ache now? And what I learned later was that my reaction time is pretty delayed and may or may not be consistent. Who knows? So even though I was always eating wheat and always had it in my system, I would just get stomach aches periodically. And other symptoms were explained away by other things. Like I was a musical theater major and I was a dancer. I was very thin due to undiagnosed celiac disease for a very long time, but I would also be in dance classes, or depending on the show that I was in, I would be in rehearsals for anywhere between 2 to 6 hours a day doing very physical activities.
Yeah.
So it was so easy to explain away, that I just happened to be very thin and I had a sensitive stomach. That was it. So 6 years later, I got a stomach ache that didn't go away for like a month, and it was awful. And so I went through all of these doctors trying to figure out what was going on. We looked at my family history and issues that I'd had in the past, and none of those were the answers. And my mom called me one day and said, I heard about this thing called celiac disease, and it sounds kind of like you. And I looked it up and I said, well, that sucks. Hope it's not that. And of course, it's what it is, right?
Yeah.
I go to my primary care doctor and he says, yeah, let's test you. Why not? And so I'm very lucky that my doctor took me seriously. He said, yeah, you have some classic symptoms. Why not? Let's test you. So he referred me to a gastroenterologist who said the same thing. He tested me, and I had actually had a moment of rebellion. Right after I got the test, I went to Whole Foods and I bought 6 boxes of wheat-based crackers. I opened all of them and took one cracker out of each box, ridiculous. And then I get the call up oh, your blood levels are actually off the charts, and I can return any of the crackers.
That is so funny. I'm laughing so hard because your story is actually the same as mine. I was a dancer, I was in musical theater. I got diagnosed when I was 8, so I got diagnosed really, really young. But as soon as I only found out about it because my brother had type 1 diabetes, and so I was actually tested for type 1 diabetes and then celiac. Okay. Because it was an autoimmune panel. So that's the only reason I found out. And then right afterwards, I ate a bag of licorice, a box of cupcakes, and I was I don't have it. I got so sick to my stomach that I was all right, I'm done.
And then you get the call oh, you have it.
Yeah. Right. That's so funny. Yeah. So when you first got diagnosed, because you were younger and there wasn't as many options at that time, what was it like to make that transition? And now what is it like with all of the added options?
Yeah, because I am a person who likes to be really prepared. And so when I started reading about celiac, there was just this little voice that was maybe you should just read more about this as you're trying to get tested. And then there was a wait for the endoscopy. And I actually had to have my endoscopy twice, because the first time the nurse, no, it wasn't the nurse, it was the front desk associate, told me the wrong information about when to stop eating. So there
Oh,
was still food in my stomach, and so I had to have the endoscopy a second time and pay for it a second time.
they made you pay for it again?
I mean, that's the healthcare system, right?
That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. At least, at least your doctor took you seriously, because I've heard lots of stories where they're like, we went to 10 doctors and nobody believed me. So you are lucky in that.
I'm Yeah, it did take me a long time from the start of my symptoms to have anyone recognize that it was a thing,
Yeah.
but once I started looking for answers very actively, I'm very lucky that it took a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
But as I was waiting for all of the tests to get completed, I was reading a lot of books. So by the time I had my endoscopy, I remember waking up from it and I was very coherent, and the doctor didn't expect me to be so coherent. And he said, yeah, so you might want to take a break from dairy for a bit. And I was sitting there just explaining to him what the enzymes that digest lactose, how they're involved with the villi. And he said, wow, yeah, good job. So by the time I was diagnosed, I knew a whole lot of information about it. So I felt really prepared. And at that point, I don't remember which products were on the market. I definitely tried some of them, but the first cookbook that I got, my grandmother got me the cookbook. And my grandmother was like, a little kooky, a little funny. But she definitely got the cookbook, called me up and said, I got you this cookbook, and I got one for myself too, because I think I might have a touch of the celiac too. And I
That's
said,
so
okay,
funny.
okay, but like very sweet gift, right?
Yeah.
So it was Carol Fenster's 1,000 gluten-free recipes, and it was an amazing cookbook. And it was one where you had to get the different types of flours and mix them together and create your own flour blend.
Right.
So that was my introduction to gluten-free baking and using those types of flours. So when all of these, like pancake mixes and bread mixes and all these things came out where you just like add two ingredients, I was like, oh wow, I've been doing all of this fun chemistry work.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to it, was just jumping right into the deep end.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do you preach on your page now, and why did you start it, and who are you trying to help?
So I started my blog. For a long time, I didn't want to have a blog because
Yeah.
there's so many blogs out there, and I was working on a lot of recipe creation just for myself. And my husband, who's my boyfriend at the time, sat me down and he said, you're being selfish. You're so positive and you have so many good recipes and you should be helping people with this.
Yeah.
So I started my blog and I started volunteering with the New York City Celiac Disease Meetup Group. And I'm one of the organizers now.
Awesome.
And I really wanted to show a very positive side of it.
Yeah.
When I was diagnosed, like I definitely like cried over the crackers, and I had my period of mourning. But ultimately, I think that when you're given cards, you have two choices. You can either, throw them up in the air and protest, or you can play your cards. So I decided to play my cards.
Right.
So I try, and when I was diagnosed, I didn't know anybody with celiac. I had no idea who anyone was, and
Yeah.
it was just such a foreign thing. I'd never heard of it before. So to be organized, I've hosted dozens and dozens of events with this meetup group, and it's so wonderful because every time people come in, it's like their first time since their diagnosis coming in, and they say, I've never met anyone before, and then they meet like 10 other people at these events who have celiac. There is just an instant spark of recognition and empathy, and it's really wonderful to develop that sense of community. So that's something that I'm always trying to promote, is the sense of community.
Yeah, that's really, really awesome. So kind of transitioning into the eating side of things, like eating out at restaurants, what has your experience been since your diagnosis with that? And also with, helping people in these groups, what are some of the struggles that you've heard other people talk about when they first get diagnosed?
So I'm very lucky because I live in New York City and we have so many wonderful restaurants here. And the flip side of it too is that there are so many restaurants that are catering to the fad diet. So
Right.
when you hear about these places that do really well with gluten-free, these cities that do really well, you have to remember that you still have to ask the questions and you still have to do the research, because some places just don't take any precautions to prevent cross contact.
Hmm.
But we do have a lot of wonderful places that are either dedicated gluten-free, or they're extremely dedicated to the celiac community specifically and have excellent cross-contact policies in place. So those are the restaurants that I tend to go to for two main reasons. One is I want to support them with my dollar. I want them to stick around. I want them to succeed.
Yeah.
And I want to support them for the community. Because if you're here for us, I want to be here for you, you know?
Right.
And then also, it makes eating out a much more enjoyable experience for me. And it makes it so much more normalized. Like, I'll still check in with the restaurants and say, hey, has anything changed since I've been here last? Like, I'm a regular at several places, and know a lot of the owners as well now. But I generally know that it's a safe place, and I can ask, you know, a quick question or two. But I don't have to sit down and spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, you know, going over the menu with a waiter, trying to figure out if it's safe, you know, feeling like I'm holding stuff up. And it's just so much more enjoyable to just sit down and have a really normal experience.
Yeah.
You know.
100%. And I totally agree with that. Like, it's so much easier to go to that restaurants where you're just like, okay, I know that they understand. So my question would be, what was it like to find those restaurants? Because obviously now you know where to go, but at the beginning of your journey, when you were like trying to figure it out, what did that process look like, and what were your frustrations there?
You know, I think I got lucky really quickly, because one of the restaurants that I went to, like, I was so prepared. I went in with my little restaurant card saying that I had celiac, and I handed it to the waiter, and they looked at me like, what is this? And I said, oh, it's my restaurant card. I have celiac. And they were like, but we just do this. Like,
That's awesome.
we do gluten free.
Yeah.
And like, it just blew my mind that it was that easy. And like, of course, I researched the place first too.
Right.
But they were like, yeah, it's just one of the things that we do, and we do it really well. There was another restaurant that I went to. It was either the first or the second one that I went to, and I loved it so much. I went back twice more that same week. I spoke with the manager afterwards and just said, you know, thank you. It's been a really crazy and stressful process to get this diagnosis, but I feel really, you know, comfortable and just happy. And thank you for having such good policies. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, I'm really glad you're okay.
That's awesome.
And I said, this is my place, and I'm going to come here forever. And you can kick me out because I'm going to be here forever.
Yeah, for sure. And when you were doing that research initially to find those restaurants, how does that process look like for you?
10 years ago, I think at that point it was looking at a lot of blogs. It was looking at meetup groups that were going to different restaurants at the time, like trying to find the other people with celiac and figuring out where they were going to, searching the city for dedicated gluten-free restaurants, searching online, you know, using a lot of different resources.
Yeah.
Now I think it's a lot easier, and there's so many wonderful blogging networks too. Like you find one gluten-free blogger on Twitter and you say, hey, can you reach out do you know any friends in like Baltimore? And that person's probably going to say, yeah, hold on, let me tweet out to my friends. And then they get back to you 10 minutes later and say, hey, these 3 people are really wonderful celiac advocates and they live in Baltimore. They're happy to give you recommendations.
Yes.
There's so many wonderful different ways to do it now, where I think when you're first diagnosed and you're first looking for resources, you're kind of overwhelmed and you're thinking, I have no idea where to go.
And what about trying new places? So if you were to travel or go somewhere that was kind of foreign, what would that look like for you?
I actually did what I just said when I went.
Okay.
Yeah.
You literally reached out to like a blog and said, like, do you have any friends? And then they tweeted out.
Well, as a blogger myself, I went onto my page and I said, hey friends, I'm going to Italy, I'm going to go to Rome, and I'm going to go to Florence and Lucca. Can someone like give me your top recommendations? Because Italy is so wonderful for gluten-free.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's so wonderful that I was like, I can't go to every single place, so give me like your top recommendations. And one person reached out to me and she said, hey Jess, I lived in Rome and I visit there every so often, and I know all of the best places, and I'm happy to help, guide you through some things, and I'm happy to help you with any other questions that you have about going to Rome. And now we're great friends, and she came to New York, and we had lunch in New York at a dedicated gluten-free restaurant, and it's just so wonderful how the community branches out in so many different ways, and how you can develop these friendships with people across the world over this common thing.
Yeah, which is awesome. Transitioning into touching on the part of having to do that research in advance. So our product is trying to create that process in a more accessible way so that it's a little bit easier. You don't have to be reaching out to people on blogs and things like that. It does take like a lot of time. And so having kind of those resources where you can like look on a restaurant's page, see like what processes they take for each allergen, and then having an allergy menu available so that you don't have to ask the chef what your options are. Just be able to generally like see all of the dedicated facilities in your area. Having that type of resource just like all in one place on an app, so that you don't have to like research. What would that be like for you, and how would that change your eating out experience?
I think that there's so much value to that. I'm the type of person who will always also double check something, because I know that
Yeah,
policies can change at any time.
right.
But I think that one of the things that I get frustrated with when you look up like random reviews for restaurants online right now is that one of the problems with celiac is that there's such a big learning curve.
Oh yeah.
And when you're first diagnosed, you might not know about separate toasters, and you might not know everything. Like, I don't pretend to know everything, and it seems like every week, like there's something that's changing in the world, or we get new research about something, or legislation changes. There's always something new to learn. So when you see these reviews, I think it's important to remember that not everyone is asking the same questions as you. Not everyone knows all the questions to ask.
Yeah.
Not everyone asks questions at all, right? Some people just we have gluten-free options at face value, and they eat there.
Yeah.
So it's very tricky to weed things out. So I think that more information that we have, if there is someone who's asking, what are your cross-contact policies here?
Yeah.
How do you do this? I think that the more data points we have that are very detailed, I'm always going to double check something, but if there's very detailed data points, like, amazing.
Right. Which it always should be double checked. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way, shape, or form that we could ever claim in a million years like we 100% know the end all be all. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, the restaurant industry is changing all the time, like you said. But I've had celiac for my entire life, and so like when I go into the restaurant, we have that procedure where we ask toaster, countertop, flat top, grill, fryer, every possible thing, and we do a full kitchen walkthrough to make sure that we understand what goes on every surface, what happened during the prep, what is risk of dripping across the line, and then write that detailed information so that you have the expectation of what you are walking yourself into. So if it's like, hey, look, they put bread on the grill, but they can totally put the bread in the oven for you if you need it. It's just like having that information to know how to direct your questions.
Exactly.
Do you have any final last thoughts or things that you want to share on your celiac journey, what you've learned over the years?
Well, could you tell me a little bit more about your program?
Yeah, for sure. So MacroMenu is an app that just launched in Denver. I go into the restaurant and I do a full kitchen walkthrough and write detailed write-ups under each allergen of directed questions that you should be asking, what to expect in terms of where cross-contact may lie. And then I also work with restaurants to create allergen menus, or I link to their existing allergy menu resources. You search near you and you see all of the restaurants that are safe for you. You'll go in, you'll see the restaurant page, you'll be able to go to all of their allergy menus, their takeout menu, see reviews from other people in the area. Still want to have that community. I think that's super important. And like you said, you even do it in person. You can reply to other people's comments, ask clarifying questions just to be able to sift through those comments. Then we have the kitchen process, which walks you through general procedures and any specialty items that they have, like a gluten-free fryer or organic or locally sourced products, things like that. And then the last tab is that allergy notes section, which is the detailed breakdown by allergen.
I love it. You're in Denver, right?
Yes, yeah. So we are starting in Denver And then the hope is to create filterable menus. So right now it's just me working with restaurants to create some kind of resources, but in the future we would like to create filterable menus that you can search by ingredient so that we can really cater to people that have niche allergies as well. So not just celiac, but weird things like peaches or grapes, or people are allergic to all different kinds of things. So I think that component of searching by ingredient is going to be really important as we grow and move forward and expand into other cities.
Great. And I have family in Colorado, so the next time I visit and I'm going through Denver, I'm going to give you a call.
Awesome. Yes, please do. I think I know every single celiac friendly restaurant in the city, so
Fabulous.
can definitely take you to lunch.
Right?
Love it. Do you have any thoughts on that or anything else, or anything you want to share with people that, are first going through this and maybe just need a word of wisdom?
Oh, I think that one of the best things I can say is that there's always going to be stuff to learn. There's always going to be things that are hard, and things change all the time. Yeah. But it gets easier, and I think it's really important to find your community.
Yeah.
Because we're here, we're ready. Absolutely. We're waiting for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the point of doing these as well. These interviews is like spreading that awareness, letting people know that they have a clan.
Yep, we're here.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course.